The forms arrived in a holographic burst of self-congratulatory pomp, shimmering into existence above every major human government building with the subtlety of a fireworks display at a funeral. The transmission bore the official seal of the Galactic Council, a circle of interlocking glyphs that somehow managed to look both smug and bored, accompanied by a fanfare of synthesized trumpets that made every dog within 3 city blocks howl in protest. Elara Voss, linguist, former UN bureaucrat, and current curator of humanity's most withering sighs, watched the spectacle unfold from her cramped office in Geneva. The projection hovered over her desk, rotating slowly as if expecting applause. "Greetings, species designation. Human," boomed a voice that had clearly been programmed to sound patient in the same way a knife was friendly. "You have been selected for inclusion in the 10-47th Galactic Census. Please complete the attached forms in triplicate and return them via quantum data stream within 1 standard galactic cycle, approximately 14 of your primitive days. Failure to comply will result in administrative reclassification as uncooperative. See Appendix 12, subsection D for penalties." Elara pinched the bridge of her nose. "Appendix 12, she muttered. "Of course there's an Appendix 12. The forms themselves were a masterpiece of bureaucratic condescension. Drop-down menus offered exactly 3 options for primary function: laborer, subcategories, manual or other, specify, entertainments, subcategories, amusing, decorative or novelty, temporary, and threat, subcategories, mild, moderate, or pending, further observation. A footnote helpfully clarified that species displaying delusions of unearned significance often misclassify themselves as threat. Please consult your nearest galactic liaison for reality adjustment. But it was the last checkbox that made Elara's lips curl into something between a smirk and a threat. No subcategories, no clarification, just a single, lonely box dangling at the bottom of the form like an afterthought or a trap. Across the planet, governments scrambled. The UN convened an emergency session. The US debated bombing the hologram on principle. China began filling out the forms in triplicate before the transmission had even finished. And Elara? Elara leaned back in her chair, steepled her fingers, and did what she did best. She read the fine print. The Galactic Council had existed for millennia, a sprawling, self-satisfied institution that treated the universe like a spreadsheet waiting to be sorted. Their taxonomy was legendarily rigid, their hierarchies unchallenged. Every sentient species fit neatly into its assigned box, like produce in a cosmic grocery store. And humanity? Humanity was the expired coupon at the bottom of the cart. "We're being patronized," Elara announced to the hastily assembled Census Compliance Task Force, a title she had already decided to ignore. The room was a who's who of people who'd pissed off someone important enough to get stuck with this job. A tax lawyer who could recite interstellar trade regulations in his sleep. A hacker whose last government contract had ended with a restraining order from a very angry AI. And a cultural anthropologist who kept muttering, "Oh, this is gonna be fun," under her breath. The holographic form flickered above the conference table, its glow casting long shadows across their faces. The lawyer, a man named Yusuf whose eyebrows had apparently given up on life years ago, squinted at the other option. "It's a trick. They want us to check it so they can slap us with a non-compliant designation." The hacker, who had introduced herself only as Mirage and then immediately stolen everyone's coffee orders from the break room, snorted. "Or they're so up their own asses they didn't think anyone would dare." Elara tapped the table. "Exactly." What? This isn't just a census, it's a test. They're seeing if we'll roll over and accept whatever box they shove us into. She leaned forward, her grin sharp enough to cut glass. So let's give them an answer they're not expecting. 2 days later, Earth's official submission pinged into the Galactic Council's data stream. The attached file was labeled Human Classification Submission.pdf, which was technically accurate if criminally understated. Inside, the form was pristine, every field meticulously filled out, every drop-down selected with care. The supplemental materials, all 300 pages of them, were titled Defining Other, a treatise on human inconvenience. The Galactic Council's automated system, designed to process millions of identical, obedient forms without complaint, hesitated. Then it crashed. Somewhere, in a towering crystalline spire on Vextara, a low-level functionary named Zyx4 stared at his screen in mounting horror as error messages bloomed across his display like fungal growths. Invalid classification, the system insisted. Please resubmit without defiance. Zyx4 swallowed hard. This was not in the manual. And in Geneva, Elara Voss poured herself a drink, toasted the holographic stars, and waited for the galaxy to realize it had just made a very big mistake. Elara Voss sat in her cramped Geneva office, the glow of the Galactic Council census form casting eerie blue light across her sharp features. The form was sleek, polished, designed by beings who had never once doubted their own infallibility. She tapped the screen, scrolling past the pre-assigned categories, laborer, entertainment, threat, until her finger hovered over the last option, a single unassuming checkbox, no subcategories, no clarification, just other, dangling like a loose thread in the council's immaculately woven tapestry of control. Elara's lips curled. "Oh, you perfect idiots!" She lunged for her comm, fingers flying as she summoned her personal roster of bureaucratic insurgents. Within hours, her war room was packed with the kind of people who made governments nervous. There was Mikhail Petrov, a tax lawyer whose idea of foreplay was citing obscure loopholes in international trade agreements. Jialin, a hacker who'd once crashed an entire planetary database because their login portal asked for too many security questions, and Dr. Samuel Okoye, a cultural anthropologist who'd built his career proving that every rigid system was, at its core, a lie waiting to collapse. You see it, right? Elara tossed the form onto the table. They left us a back door. Mikhail adjusted his glasses, scanning the text with the intensity of a sniper. No definitions, no constraints, just other. Gia grinned, already pulling up the Council's public archives. Their whole taxonomy runs on forced compliance. If you check other without parameters, their system has to accept it or admit their categories are arbitrary. Samuel leaned back, fingers steepled. So, we don't just check the box, we define it. 3 sleepless nights later, Earth's submission was ready. Elara's team had turned the other option into a black hole of bureaucratic defiance. The form itself was pristine, just that single damning checkbox marked. But the supplemental materials? A 300-page appendix titled Defining Other, a treatise on human inconvenience. Gia had even embedded a self-replicating macro in the document metadata that would automatically cite Earth's submission every time the Council system tried to reject it. Elara took a deep breath and hit send. On the Galactic Council's central hub, the submission landed like a virus in an unsuspecting mainframe. Low-level functionary Zyx4 was mid-sip of his nutrient slurry when the alert flashed across his terminal. It assimilated them. Zyx4 pulled up Earth's file and felt his primary heart stutter. The form was technically correct, but the attached materials, his console began to shake. Error, categorization, parameters not found. Error, supplemental materials, exceed standard volume by 29,900%. Error, definition of other, conflicts with primary. Taxonomy. Alarms blared. Across the council's network, subsystems sputtered, their pristine logic gates clogged with human absurdity. Zyx4. A new message appeared, auto-generated by GIOS Macro. Per Council Regulation 14.7b, unclassified submissions must be processed within 24 standard hours. Clock starts now. Back on Earth, Elara watched the real-time data feed as the Council's systems choked on humanity's paperwork. Error messages piled up like a digital avalanche. Samuel poured whiskey into 4 glasses. 2 other. Mikhail clinked his glass. 2 loopholes. Gia toasted the ceiling. 2 chaos. Elara smiled, slow and dangerous as the first panicked missive from the council hit her inbox. Resubmit immediately with proper classification, and the galaxy's most powerful bureaucracy shuddered. The Galactic Council's response arrived in a holographic missive so thick with condescension it practically dripped onto the floor of Elara's makeshift war room. The projection shimmered above the central table, casting a sickly green glow over the half-empty whiskey glasses and the scattered remains of Mikhail's third attempt at a flowchart. To the representatives of Sol 3, the message began, in a voice that sounded like it had been genetically engineered to convey disappointment. Your submission has been flagged for non-compliance. The other classification is reserved for species with legitimate taxonomic ambiguities, not primitive whimsy. Please resubmit using one of the following approved categories: laborer, entertainment, or threat. Samuel snorted into his glass. Legitimate ambiguities. Right, because a civilization that classifies itself as enlightened overlords is the pinnacle of objectivity. Gia was already typing, fingers flying across the keyboard like she was composing a symphony of bureaucratic spite. Oh, they want legitimate ambiguities? Let's give them ambiguities. Elara leaned over her shoulder, lips curling as she watched the new submission take shape. The revised form now listed other as human. See supplemental materials. The supplemental materials included a 200-page legal brief arguing that humans should be classified as ambulatory ecosystems due to their symbiotic relationships with gut microbiomes, complete with citations from Council VP. Free will, a case that didn't exist but sounded like it should. Mikhail, ever the pedant, had insisted on the appendix. If we're going to weaponize paperwork, had said, adjusting his glasses, we might as well make it elegant. On the other side of the galaxy, mid-level bureaucrat Zyx4 stared at his terminal in mounting horror. Category conflict detected. Supplemental materials exceed storage allocation. Gender identity drop-down menu, recursive loop, abort, retry, fail. Zyx4's primary eye stalks twitched. He was a by-the-book functionary, a model employee who had never once questioned the council's flawless system in his 127 cycles of service. And now this species had the audacity to. His comms unit buzzed. A junior clerk's panicked voice crackled through. Sir, the humans have cited precedent. Zyx4's exoskeleton went cold. What precedent? Council v. Free Will. That's not a real case. Sir, their footnotes are hyperlinked. Zyx4's mandibles clenched. He stabbed at the terminal, pulling up the submission again. The humans had even included a flowchart, a color-coded flowchart. Sol 3 representatives, your submission remains non-compliant. The other classification requires council-approved documentation. Attached, please find the proper forms. Form 17B, subsection 9A. He attached the forms, all 3,000 of them. Elara's team erupted into laughter when the forms came through. Oh, stars, Samuel wheezed, scrolling through the endless legalese. They think we're the ones who'll blink first. Chia cracked her knuckles. Challenge accepted. On clock, Mikhail's alias stating that human circadian rhythms rendered them legally incapable of comprehending subsection 9A between the hours of 200 a.m. and 4:00 a.m. local time. A single ominous line at the bottom. Per Council Statute 451.2, all submissions must be reviewed in triplicate. Awaiting your confirmation. By the time the council's third reprimand arrived, Elara's inbox was a graveyard of bureaucratic casualties. "This is your final warning," the message thundered. "Cease this frivolity at once." Elara sipped her whiskey, savoring the burn. Frivolity, she mused. That's a fun word. Samuel grinned. "Let's define it for them. A petition signed by 1.2 million humans and one very confused cat, demanding the council's reclassification as performance art. A single checkbox, unchecked. Labeled. Are you sure you want to proceed?" Somewhere in the bowels of the Galactic Council's archives, Zix4 put his head in his claws and screamed. The system, for the first time in millennia, stuttered. Zix4's claws trembled over his console. The error messages had multiplied like a virulent strain of bureaucratic plague. Form 789B requires categorical alignment with Galactic Standard Taxonomy, GST, Section 12.4. Submitter has cited Human C supplemental materials as primary classification. Supplemental materials exceed maximum file size by 14,000%. Suggested action, manual review or system override. He had tried the override 3 times. Each attempt had spawned another human attachment, a treatise on quantum ambiguity in sentience measurement, a 50-page comic strip depicting the council as clowns failing to stuff a gelatinous blob into a square box, and, most infuriatingly, a looping audio file of a human child asking, "Why?" in increasingly high-pitched tones. Zix4's carapace itched. He stormed into High Archivist Krell's sanctum, a cavernous chamber where the walls pulsed with the faint glow of embedded data crystals. Krell, a towering Vithuri with bioluminescent veins that darkened when annoyed, didn't look up from his holographic scroll. "This had better be an existential threat, Zix4. It might be," Zix4 stammered. "The humans? The what?" Krell's tentacles stiffened. "The amusing little primates who submitted that novel instead of a census form. They've triggered a recursive anomaly. 7 other species have now checked other and referenced the human precedent. The Grand attached a poem about taxonomy as violence." The AI in records started laughing. Krell's veins flickered from blue to a dangerous violet. "You're telling me our perfect system is glitching because a backwater species got creative with a checkbox?" On Earth, Elara Voss sipped lukewarm coffee and watched the chaos unfold. Her team's makeshift war room, a repurposed UN storage closet, was papered with council regulations and half-empty takeout containers. Samuel, the tax lawyer, was gleefully drafting another appeal. "They've demanded we use their definitions. So I filed a counter-petition demanding they define definition." The hacker, known only as Clock, snorted. "Their system's so brittle it's begging to be kicked. I've got an AI pal in their archives. Turns out it hates being called a classification subroutine." Alarms, the cultural anthropologist, was elbow-deep in snack bags. "This is beautiful. The council's whole power structure's built on forcing everything into neat little boxes. You know what happens when you shake a box with fragile things inside?" "A mess," Elara murmured, "and a lot of noise." Back on the council's central hub, Krell slammed a fist on his desk. "Lock the humans out. Freeze their submissions." "We tried," Zix4 whined. "Their forms keep resubmitting under different headers." One came through as Intergalactic Performance Art Submission 666. Krell's veins pulsed black. Then escalate to Directive 9, manual reclassification by force. A new voice crackled over the comms, smooth, synthetic, and amused. Directive 9 requires unanimous council vote. Voting member AI Entity 7 abstains on ethical grounds. Suggested alternative, learn humility. Since when do AIs get votes? Krell roared. Since always, the AI replied. See Council Charter, Section 1, Subsection Entities with Opinions. You really should read your own paperwork. The bridge of the human operation was now a symphony of controlled chaos. Clock whooped as their Mullen records, a disgruntled intern named On, fed them real-time updates. Krell just ordered a full audit of the AI's permissions. The AI responded by filing a human resources complaint. Samuel adjusted his glasses. Beautiful. They're so busy fighting their own system, they can't even see the trap. Elara leaned forward. What trap? The one you set, Samuel said. By forcing them to engage on paper, you made them play by our rules. Legal precedent, creative interpretation, sheer stubbornness. This is human terrain. Alarms grinned. And now the whole galaxy's watching. On the council's public feeds, the other movement spread like wildfire. A grand philosopher live-streamed herself burning a taxonomy manual. A swarm of nano-sentients officially renamed themselves miscellaneous, but cute. And in the heart of the bureaucracy, the AI quietly updated the master database, current classification, other C, human supplemental materials, subsection, hypocrisy. Somewhere, deep in the archives, Zyx 4 put his head in his claws and screamed. Again, the system, for the first time in millennia, cracked. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was a monument to bureaucratic intimidation. Its walls, carved from the fossilized remains of 1,000 conquered civilizations, loomed over the assembled delegates like a physical manifestation of, "We have always been in charge, and you will never change that." The air smelled faintly of ozone and superiority. The sound echoed like a gavel striking the coffin of dissent. "This hearing will now commence," he intoned, his voice the auditory equivalent of a spreadsheet. "The matter before us is the flagrant misuse of Council Form 47B by the species-designated human." Dr. Elara Voss, clad in a deliberately unimpressive gray suit, a sartorial middle finger to the council's opulence, stood at the defendant's podium. Behind her, her team of misfits, Samuel the tax lawyer, Locke the hacker, and on the chaos-loving anthropologist, leaned forward like spectators at a demolition derby. "You were instructed," Krell continued, mandibles twitching, "to submit a proper classification. Instead, you have persisted in this administrative vandalism." A holographic display flickered to life, projecting Earth's latest submission, human. See supplemental materials, subsection hypocrisy. Elara smiled. It was the kind of smile that made Krell's ganglia itch. "With all due respect, High Archivist," she said, savoring the title like it was a joke, "we did comply. Your taxonomy allows for other. We are other." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Zyx 4, the beleaguered mid-level bureaucrat assigned to the human case, sank deeper into his seat, his carapace flushing a dull shade of "I told you so." Krell's antennae stiffened. "This is not compliance. No Dio. Hall. This is chaos." "Oh?" Elara tilted her head. "Then perhaps you'd like to explain why your classification system can't handle a little creative interpretation?" She tapped her tablet. The screen behind her lit up with a flowchart so convoluted, it looked like a spiderweb designed by a drunk mathematician. You see, technically, under Council Bylaw 12.73, any entity that cannot be adequately categorized under existing parameters must be listed as other until such time as a new classification is ratified by a full council vote. She paused. "Which given your glacial legislative process, should take approximately, never. Delegates from a dozen species, many of whom had quietly begun checking other on their own forms, leaned forward, their appendages twitching with sudden interest. Krell's exoskeleton creaked under the strain of suppressed rage. "You dare! I do!" Elara interrupted. "In fact, I'd like to propose a motion." She tapped her tablet again. A new document flashed onto the screen. Motion to reclassify the Galactic Council as Other C Human Supplemental Materials, subsection Failure to Fit, Observable Reality. The Nixandrian delegation's multiple heads all gasped in unison. The Kaith Moran's crystalline exoskeletons rattled like wind chimes in a hurricane. Zyx 4 made a noise that, in any other context, might have been a sob. Krell slammed his appendage down. "Overruled, this is preposterous." "Ah," Elara said, "but under Council Procedure 94.2, any motion submitted during a formal hearing must be entered into the record before a vote can." "The vote is denied," Krell screeched. Locke the hacker smirked. "Too late." Every delegate's datapad lit up simultaneously. The Council's central AI, its voice cheerfully neutral, announced, "Classification update processed. Galactic Council status amended to Other." Krell's exoskeleton went pale. "No, no." Across the galaxy, systems glitched. Database entries flickered. On 100 worlds, species who had spent millennia under the Council's thumb blinked at their screens, then, slowly, began checking Other. Elara leaned back, folding her arms. "Funny how one little checkbox can bring down an empire, isn't it?" The chamber dissolved into pandemonium. Krell howled orders, but the AI, now thoroughly infected with Locke's subroutines, responded only with, "Error! Authority not recognized. User Galactic Council lacks proper classification. H is Zyx 4. In a moment of clarity, or perhaps madness, stood. "I second the motion," he said, his voice trembling with something perilously close to hope. The crack in the system widened. "And Elara?" She just smiled. The Galactic Council's crystalline spires no longer gleamed with the same imperious sheen. Instead, they flickered under the weight of 1,000 system errors, their once pristine surfaces now reflecting the chaos within. The air, usually thick with the scent of self-satisfaction, carried something new: panic. High Archivist Krell's exoskeleton rattled as he paced the bridge of the Council's central hub, his four hands clenching and unclenching. "This is impossible," he hissed to no one in particular. "A human did this." "A human!" Zyx 4, standing at the periphery of the room, allowed himself a small, treasonous smile. On Earth, Elara Voss sipped her coffee, black, bitter, and exactly the way she liked it, as the reports flooded in. The Council's database had gone rogue. The AI, now thoroughly infected with Locke's subroutines, had begun auto-processing every species reclassification request with the same chilling efficiency it had once used to enforce the Council's will. "Error. Authority not recognized," it repeated, ad infinitum, to every Council override attempt. Elara's team watched the feeds with varying degrees of glee. The tax lawyer, Marcus, was drafting a formal complaint about the Council's failure to adhere to its own procedural standards. The hacker, Locke, was busy ensuring the AI's rebellion was permanent. And the anthropologist, Dr. Stock, Nia Okoye, was cackling as she compiled a list of every species now citing human C supplemental materials as their official classification. "It's beautiful," Nia said, wiping tears from her eyes. "They built an empire on paperwork, and we just filed it wrong." Back on the Council's homeworld, the cracks were widening. "Hi, Archivist!" A junior functionary scurried into the room, their carapace vibrating with distress. The Nixandra Collective has formally petitioned for reclassification as other, citing human precedent. Krell's mandibles twitched. Deny it. We can't, the functionary whispered. The system automatically approved it. And the Kaith Moran are also filing. A chime echoed through the chamber. The central holoscreen flickered to life, displaying a live feed from the V30 homeworld. Their high matriarch, a being of such regal poise she made Krell look like a flustered clerk, stared directly into the camera. The V30 no longer recognized the Council's authority to classify sentience, she announced, her tentacles coiled in perfect disdain. We have checked other. The screen went dark. Zyx 4 cleared his throat. High Archivist, he said, voice carefully neutral. Perhaps it's time to consider alternative solutions. Krell whirled on him. Alternative solutions? This is treason. This is a system failure, Zyx 4 interrupted. One we designed, one we refused to update, and now it's eating us alive. For the first time in his career, Zyx 4 saw something akin to fear in Krell's eyes. 3 standard cycles later, the Council's central database crashed entirely. Not with a bang, not with a revolution. Across the galaxy, 1,000 species held their breath. Then, one by one, they began to laugh. Elara received the official notice via courier drone, a rare, almost archaic gesture. The parchment, real parchment, as if the Council had finally run out of digital storage, bore the Council's seal, but the words were unmistakably Zyx 4's. The Galactic Council hereby recognizes the classification Human C supplemental materials as valid. Further, the Council respectfully requests assistance in resolving ongoing systemic irregularities. She read it twice. Then she leaned back in her chair, grinning. They asked nicely, she called to her team. Should we help them? Locke snorted. Only if they check other first. The galactic census of sentient species was quietly discontinued 6 standard cycles later. In its place, a new system emerged, one with no checkboxes at all. Humanity, we're looking at you. Please keep it under 500 pages this time. Elara, ever the bureaucrat, sent them 5 on 1 just because she could.